Welcome back to the Crypto Astro channel, bringing a radical, innovative new approach to crypto analysis, combining technical analysis with astrology. I'll give my predictions and what I'm doing at the end of the video, but also please use caution in the comments below as there are many spam bots, so please ignore those. But none of this content is financial or investment advice. This content is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. Okay, so what caused this crazy market crash? Well, arguably it was this right here, the Nikkei, the Japan markets. We'll talk more about this, but overall, I mean, there was in the last few days from the end of July right there was a 22% drop. Arguably, some are saying this is the biggest crash since 1987. But then if we zoom out, we haven't seen something comparable to this since COVID. But the fact that it dropped so far within one day is pretty crazy and really spooked the markets. So what we're seeing in the markets is maximum fear. We're seeing extreme fear in the stock market over here on the left, hitting 16, and then extreme fear in the crypto market as well, not surprising. And then we have a very, very, very high chance that the Fed is going to cut rates on September 18th. Or perhaps they might even have a surprise meeting before that and cut rates. But it looks like there's a 75% chance right now that they're going to cut rates 2 times. So that's very significant as well. So here, let's see what else we want to do. Also looking at the S&P 500, so obviously we got a big dump here. We went, how far of a drop is this? All the way down 8% within those few days. Now we're bouncing up, but the interesting thing is we're not bouncing up as high as the Nikkei. Only 3% back up. The Nikkei recently bounced 10% up, or actually even more. Bounced all the way up to 14% up and then fell back down to here to be a total of 9% so far today. So the S&P 500 has not gotten as much of a rebound. We'll continue to keep our eyes on that. But I actually, believe it or not, I warned you guys right here that we could, back in about July 23rd, a couple weeks ago, I warned you guys that there could be much more downside to come. And let me show you guys proof of that. The proof is in the pudding. Let me show the proof. Let me turn up the volume here for a second. All right, here we go. Warning, S&P 500, 3 down days in a row could be trouble. So take a look at this. These are the last 3 days. We first have, this is the most important part. We have a market peak right here. And then right after that, we have one down day, 2 down days, 3 down days in a row. And so I have a indicator, the TIA again, swing indicator, which I recommend. The red arrows represent down days. The green arrows represent up days. We have to get 3 red arrows in a row for this indicator to hit after a market peak. That's exactly what we're getting. Typically, that marks that there is more downward pressure to come. And I'll show you an example of this. We actually had this. All right, so I warned you guys a couple weeks ago, more downside to come. Let's thank that indicator too. That's a really amazing indicator. So the Gann swing indicator, I do not get any sort of sponsorship with that, by the way. So there's that warning. And so we have been falling. The Dow Jones fell quite a bit. The Russell fell. Right when people were starting to get a little bit euphoric, starting to really get excited about Bitcoin going to 100K. Additionally, the DXY has been falling. So typically that's bullish. Typically when the DXY, the dollar index compared to other currencies, when it's falling, that's typically bullish. But in this case, there's so much market fear that everything is falling along with the dollar, including gold fell a little bit. But yeah, arguably the cause was this guy right here. Now, one really interesting thing is all at the same time, we're heading right into Mercury retrograde. We are now in Mercury retrograde for all of you astrology peeps. Here is what we've been doing. So from the point of view from Earth, here's Mercury. Now, Mercury was going in the opposite direction, but now, as you can see, it's going to be going to the right. You take a look at Mercury there. And so all the way through, I believe, August 28th is going to be retrograde before it goes back in the other direction around the sun there. As you can see, it's glitching a little bit. But so Mercury retrograde. And typically with Mercury retrograde, we do see market dumps. Now, it did catch me by surprise this time because similarly to August of last year, we got a big dump in the market before retrograde hit, a few days before. Now, this doesn't happen very often, so it's very difficult to predict. But it looks like Mercury retrograde came early. Some people say Mercury and Gatorade because they don't even know what the heck it is, as a joke on Twitter. Mercury and Gatorade is causing a lot of problems. All right, so we did already get the dump. That's potentially the good news, if that's good news. In my opinion, not financial advice, it's a great buying opportunity. I did nibble a bit more. It was a very difficult dump in the markets. I thought it was going to go down a little bit more. There was a lot of fear, so it was very tricky to buy at the right moment. So we could get more sideways consolidation with this Mercury retrograde. We'll have to keep our eyes on this. Or if we already got all the dumps out of the way, we could be heading back up. It's difficult to predict. The problem is we head into mid-August and we're getting some very negative transits with Mars. You see Mars is going to conjunct Jupiter here. They're going to be lined up almost exactly. Well, they are going to get an exact hit around here. Mars exactly lines up with Jupiter, and they're going to be squaring the malefic planet Saturn over here. This guy way over here, they're going to be, Mars the malefic is going to be square Saturn. Jupiter the benefic is going to also be squaring Saturn, and Saturn can tend to bring hard lessons in reality. Now, this has already come to markets, so I'm not sure if there's much more pain to come, but the fact that we haven't even gotten the direct hit yet shows that we certainly could have more pain to come. So whether that's sideways consolidation, it could be, or whether it's another major market dump, which is totally possible, we cannot count that out, especially with Saturn here getting squares from Mars and Jupiter. There's definitely much more caution in the second half of August. But we always got to keep our eyes on the charts because the charts rule the show, okay? The charts show the truth. Men lie, women lie, the charts don't lie. So we got to pay attention to these. Okay, now we're going to be diving into, well, first off, let me share a bit more about everything that happened. So Bank of Japan increased its rates by 25 points, pushing investors who followed the yen at 0%, or they borrowed the yen at 0% to sell to pay their loans back. So that's arguably what this major dump was right here. If we zoom in, you know, this massive dump is the people who borrowed had to sell to pay their loans back. But speaking of Japan, the Nikkei lost 451 points on Monday, its biggest ever one-day drop in history. Fears of war escalation in the Middle East after the assassination of the Hamas leader could also play a part in the fear here. Also, Warren Buffett sold half of his Apple stocks. Apple was roughly half of his portfolio. Berkshire Hathaway's cash position now amounts to $277 billion. That is absolutely unbelievable. It doesn't mean that the bull market is over, but it does mean that bears are in control at the moment, and the bears are making things look quite bearish. The economy is on borrowed time and cracks are starting to show. The measures authorities will take to fix these cracks will fuel the last leg up of the bull market. All right, so the Fed is scheduled to cut rates in September. It's very, very likely currently, according to the statistics with CME Group. These include the rate cuts we've been hearing about. We have already seen several countries do so, 2 rate cuts in Canada already, and 1 in the UK last week. Next up is the highly anticipated Fed cuts in September. Also, Bitcoin lost, let's go to Bitcoin here. Bitcoin lost roughly 17,500 and dropped 25% last week, wrecking leveraged longs across the board. So if we look at that, let's look at the liquidations. This is the latest liquidations, but I believe it was over $1 billion of liquidations a couple days ago. Right now it's much lower, but still, this is still significant. $207 million wrecked in the last 24 hours. So very significant dump here. Let's take a look at, so we started dumping from this peak on, really right at the end of July, right on time. Was this planned? Who knows? 30% drop. Wow. And it happened only within about a few days here. About 6 days, it looks like. 7 days. My goodness. We have not seen a 30% drop in a long time. I mean, let's look a little bit back in the history books. How far was this drop? After the ETF was approved, that was significant. That was only 21%. That was not 30%. Let's go back here. Now, this is on logarithmic scale, just FYI. Trying out logarithmic. And this dump was only 22%. And this one was, I believe, 21. Let's look at the super scary bank collapses in 2023. That was only 22% drop. We have not seen a 30% drop this entire bull market, so this is extremely significant. Yeah, this is tricky. I mean, we're definitely going to have to hold. We definitely want to hold this 49,000 price point because that's from the very peak of the market. Actually, let me move this a little bit. The peak of the market down to the bottom is this 49,000 level. Now we hit that level and we got a really nice bounce. So really good news there. We got this really solid bounce. However, we are nearing this trend line that I just put up there. We do got to get past that soon. One thing that's interesting is Solana. Solana did get past that trend line I had there. But so far, Bitcoin is still under. Let's zoom in here. Bitcoin is still under this basic trend line. If we go in even closer, you know, it still hasn't got back up to that trend line. Solana has gotten past that trend line, but Ethereum is also way below it as well. So we're gonna have to see if Bitcoin is able to shoot through this trend line, bounce off of it, and go back up, or if it's gonna get rejected. It could even pop through a little bit, but is it just gonna go like that or something? Honestly, a lot of this, I believe, depends on the macro, and I believe this dump in the market was 100% because of the macro markets, with the Nikkei and the S&P500 dumping. What happens is, since the Bitcoin ETFs, we have, you know, people investing in these ETFs, and they freak out when there's maximum fear, extreme fear, as it shows right here. What do people do? They sell. They sell their bags, especially risk on assets. They tend to sell those. So since Bitcoin is still perceived as a risk on asset, it's arguably not still perceived as digital gold yet by the masses. You know, I talked to my dad about this. He still doesn't understand what the heck Bitcoin is. So the masses still don't fully understand it. Big surprise, big surprise. We've been here for decades. So we have to see, a lot of it depends on the macro. Next levels of support would be, yeah, this 49 level, of course. And I mean, if it breaks through that, we could head down to 44, I believe. If we go back here, yeah, there's a bit of support back here, this 44 level. Could put a line there. So let's say 45, around there. And then if we head back up, we want to continue to get back above the 50% line from this peak, this local peak, down to this bottom. And if we look at this green line right here, It's at 59,000. So we would have to get above that. So we would have to get back above 60,000 to be really strong. So we'd have to get some nice pumps sooner rather than later. One thing that's interesting I want to share really quick is that one of my top altcoin picks that I mentioned in my private Crypto Astro Mastermind in the masterclass, altcoins with 10x to 20x potential. One of my top altcoins held up incredibly strong. It only dropped a little bit and bounced back up, and it has actually returned to where it was prior to this dump. So if it started up right at 70, let's say like up here at this peak, it bounced right back up to the peak. So it's holding up very strongly, and it potentially has 10x, 20x potential. If you guys would like to get access to that training where I mentioned these top altcoins, you can get instant access to this masterclass, and you'll get lifetime access to monthly calls with me where I go through much, much deeper analysis on Bitcoin, altcoins, the macro markets, much deeper than I do on these free YouTube videos. Get access to that by clicking the link below, signing up, and once again, you get lifetime access with just one payment. I believe it's only $4.97 right now. Jump on that, guys, if you're interested. All right, and if you haven't already, definitely subscribe. We want to keep boosting this channel up, get it out to more people. That helps the algorithm if you also click the like button. All right, now with the Fed rate cuts, if we zoom out and we look at the historical Fed rate cuts, let's see if this works. Historically, when the Fed starts cutting aggressively, let's see what happens. They started cutting pretty aggressively back here in 2019. That was also when we got maximum fear in the crypto markets. This is the crypto fear and greed index. That was also around the time we dumped from peak euphoria to getting super high greed on the Bitcoin greed and fear index, to then we dumped all the way down to under 20. And what did we just do? And that was when the Fed started cutting. And what did we just do recently, guys? We went from maximum greed, euphoria, and we just dumped to 17. We just dumped below 20. I mean, the last time that happened was in the bear market, 2022, as well as May 2021. Then COVID. And then before that was when the Fed started cutting in 2019. Very, very, very significant, guys. I mean, and then look at what happened after they started cutting. How long did this take? We got months and months and months of just sideways action, and then the COVID dump. And we didn't start to get really bullish, arguably, until here. Kind of the last buy opportunity in 2020. October 2020, approximately. That was more than a year, guys. Holy moly. That's a little scary. Could we have another year of sideways action as the Fed just starts cutting in September? Yikes. It's possible. I'm not saying that's happening, but we almost might want to be prepared for that. That's a little scary. Long drawn out sideways consolidation is not fun in crypto markets, especially when it lasts more than a year. Okay, so the next time the Fed rates cut aggressively, they cut a little bit here, but Bitcoin's continued to head up. So when they cut just a little bit, Bitcoin still goes up, as you can see here. A little bit of pretty long consolidation there, actually. But when the Fed starts cutting aggressively, this is the Fed line here. Look at this. Right when they started cutting, the Bitcoin market peaks right here. And then it just starts falling off. Falls off a cliff. And then it does rebound, actually. So it actually does decently well. So we could see something like that. We've already seen a big dump. So maybe we could have a bit more dumps to go once the Fed starts cutting. If we look back here, look at this orange line. The Fed cuts rates aggressively. Wow, it actually... Well, here's a case that it actually did decently well. Fed started cutting, and it went sideways for a while. But typically when they get down to zero, when they get really low, then markets really pump. So maybe the Fed rates were not very high right there anyways. Let's zoom out compared to... Oh, they actually were decently high. So there's one example where the markets still do pump, but typically they don't pump until the Fed rate cuts have already cut all the way down. All right, so there's that. All right, as I mentioned, we do have Mercury retrograde here. There's Mercury. And we already had the new moon, and we had Venus opposite the Bitcoin Venus. Then we have Mercury retrograde coming up. But the tricky thing, as I mentioned, we get to August 14th, and we have Mars, the malefic, conjuncting Jupiter right here. And this is where concern steps in, as then the next day we have Mars exact square to Saturn here. Two malefics squaring each other. That can bring challenges for sure. It can bring explosive events. Could bring explosions, literally. So concerning. And then we get Mercury retrograde squaring Uranus on the 17th. That's not very good. This Mercury right here squaring Jupiter. You see they're both, squaring Uranus. They're both at 27 degrees exactly. Then on August 19th, we get Jupiter square Saturn. So Jupiter right here, 17 degrees, squaring Saturn at 17 degrees. And we also get the full moon. The sun opposite the moon creates a full moon. Yeah, and we're getting all those squares. We're also getting the moon opposite Mercury. And Jupiter squaring Saturn, Venus opposite Saturn. So Venus is also opposite. Jeez, this is not good, guys. So we could have more downside to come or more explosive world events. This is also happening, I believe, during the Democratic convention. So not very good energy for that. We'll see what happens. So, man, I mean, it's very difficult to predict. Lots of volatility, more consolidation, or more dumps. Probably some fearful events in August. It could get crazy, actually. August could get totally crazy. We could definitely see, we've already gotten arguably a black swan. Well, what is this, a gray swan event? What would you guys consider it? There could be more to come, honestly, in August, potentially even September. Then we get the eclipses in September, and I'm going to be coming out with a lot of videos about that. So definitely subscribe if you want to get access to these epic videos. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let's see who is active in the comments. Beautiful. So can we dive into the NASDAQ astrology? Are we dropping lower? When do you see the Solana astrology improving? I don't know what that is there. Is the bull run finished? That's a pretty good question. I don't believe so. Now, let me cover that first. That's a good question. Probably one that many people are concerned about. Let's go. So when in doubt, zoom out. I'm going to go to a much more clean chart here. Let me zoom in, and let's take off the Fed rates. Hold on. So is the bull market over? When in doubt, zoom out. Let's go to the 2 week, or actually no, the monthly. Okay, so as you can see, look at these orange lines. So these are the swing tops and swing bottoms. So we got into this is on a logarithmic scale. So if it looks a little different, that's why. Let's zoom in more. So we got the bottom back in November 2022. We headed back up. Look at this orange line. Then we bounced off of this swing bottom here, headed back up. What we want to look for on the way up is higher lows and higher highs. So we're getting higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, barely. And we're getting a much higher high, and then we're waiting for the lower low. So I mean, arguably the only chance we're not in a macro bull market. Well, let me go to the 2-week. The first red flag would be if we drop below this swing bottom here, this higher low on the 2-weekly chart. This is at 38,436. So hypothetically, it could potentially head that low and still be in a bull run, in a macro bull run. However, we do want to continue to see, I mean, for a much higher probability, we want to see a bounce off of this swing top right here at 49,000, which we have seen already. So that's very, very good. But arguably, I mean, if we actually could go a bit further down and head back up still be in a bull market. So according to this, swing bottoms, we want to see a higher low, higher high. On these, we're seeing this is on the 2-week chart. We are seeing lower lows, lower highs, and that's a bit bearish. But since we haven't broken this swing bottom at 38,500, we could still be in a bull market. I would say arguably we are still in the bull market, especially if we look at the monthly, because this is still a much higher low compared to this low down here. This was back in September 2023 last year. So I would argue since this is a higher low, we're still in a bull market. So that's the good news. Now, that's not to say that we're just going to head up from here. We could have long drawn out sideways action. We'll have to wait and see. Okay. Given that Mercury retro is usually a sign of trend reversal and we're going down before the retro, could it mean we could go bullish now? It could, but the fact that we're getting really negative astrology with Mars squaring Saturn, Jupiter squaring Saturn, and then a really gnarly full moon on the 19th that does not look good. I mean, I would not predict that. It's just tough. It's just tough. I mean, we could look deeper at the Bitcoin astrology, but let's look at this comment here. We got a comment about, can we dive into the NASDAQ astrology? Yeah, so let's see if the NASDAQ astrology gives us any hints. This is a great question. I'm giving you guys the goods here. Definitely subscribe and hit that like button, guys, because I'm giving you guys the goods. Typically, I only give this on my private Crypto Astro Mastermind calls that we do once per month. We go for 60 minutes or longer, and I answer all your questions, and I deep dive into all kinds of different astrology, like the NASDAQ astrology and altcoins astrology. So I'll give you guys a hint here. Let's see where this is headed. For the NASDAQ, we do, I mean, we're getting a little bit positive, but we have a negative hit. Neptune opposite the NASDAQ. Pluto being the planet of wealth, but Neptune bringing confusion to the markets. The markets don't like confusion. On August 20th, right around that gnarly full moon, almost exactly on the day. And then we get another negative hit. Oh my goodness. Pluto opposite the NASDAQ moon. So this is concerning. We could see more dumpage around that full moon, or maybe right after the full moon. Literally the 2 days after it, we get this major negative hits on the NASDAQ astrology. That's concerning. Let's see if there's any positive astrology to balance it out. Well, right after on this September 2nd, we get this positive hit. Jupiter trining the NASDAQ Sun. And then we get Saturn sextiling the NASDAQ Saturn on the 6th. So perhaps if there is another dump, we could get a nice rebound right after. So I would think, not financial advice, but if there is another dump, more downside, it could be a great buying opportunity around these times. Typically, I mean, when I'm looking at this, I think, when we get major negative astrology hits, we're getting two almost on the exact same time. This is definitely significant, but those could be a great time for buying. All right, so very, very interesting and a great question, Morningstar. Morningstar. I don't know. It sounds like there could be a good song about Morningstar. Morningstar. Okay, so when do you see the Solana astrology improving? Another good question. If you guys want me to go much deeper on this, if you want me to look out into next year, definitely join my private Crypto Astro Mastermind. This is pretty good. I mean, it's like pretty good. Not like amazing, but it's definitely positive. Neptune sextiling the Solana Saturn on the 8th. Bringing good energy on August 8th. That's not much of a big deal. I mean, we get a direct hit. Uranus sextiling the Solana Sun in October, direct hit. But it is in orb right now, but I don't know. Might be affecting it a bit. We do get this slightly negative Jupiter squaring the Solana Neptune on August 28th. So perhaps there's a dump at the end of the month, especially if the macro markets dump too. The Solana is definitely going to dump. I was actually thinking Solana might go below 100. If we see another macro dump, I think Solana could get down to maybe 108, 105. And if it falls below that, definitely below 100. So that was actually, I was looking at like 108, 105 to buy in. But the problem with that is I missed the opportunity to buy at 111 because I got a little too greedy. But we will see. We'll see if that was a good call, because if there is a macro dump, we could be heading lower for sure. But we got to keep our eyes on the charts. We can't just say that we have a crystal ball and we know exactly what's going to happen. All right. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. Let's look at this. You should start from now on with this song because you have a great voice. Morning star, the morning star. Tune into the morning star. All right. Thanks, guys. Bitcoin has already went to its all-time high before halving. Do you think it will go to new all-time high this year? That's a great question. I don't have a crystal ball. I would say if the macro recovers and the macro starts pumping again, there's a chance it could at the end of the year. But if not this year, 2025, I'd really put my money on Bitcoin all-time high for sure. All right, so I'm very bullish. End of this year, heading into next year. But the next few months, we could have some little bit of sideways action, some dumps, consolidation. We'll see. We'll have to keep our eyes on the chart. All right, thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Morningstar. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Andy, Michelle, Ananth, Ave, Christian, Sean. Thanks for tuning in live, guys. Definitely check out my Crypto Astro Mastermind if you feel called, and be coming out with a lot more videos. So stay tuned, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.